Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. If you get that, because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Welcome. Greetings. Happy Monday. I don't know if you've dug out of the snow yet, but if you have, welcome. If you have not yet dug out of the snow, welcome to you as well. Now's the time to admit that I am a terrible husband. I try to be a good husband. I think for the most part, I'm generally a very good husband, but I had meetings all day. Kids were home. Flexible instruction days, which I declared war on Friday. I think flexible instruction days are pretty much like the spawn of Satan. They shouldn't happen. They're horrible. And here we are with a foot of snow on the ground, or roughly a foot of snow on the ground, and kids have to be on virtual classes. I think it is domestic terrorism, and I'm sure that YouTube will now flag this video because I said that, but flexible instruction days are horrible and need to be abolished without question. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, you're thinking, Russ, how do flexible instruction days make you a bad husband? It's a great question. Thank you for asking. I'll give you an answer. While I was in the midst of my meetings for the day, unbeknownst to me, my wife went outside and she shoveled. Now, we did pay some neighborhood kids yesterday. There was like a group of 5 or 6 kids who showed up at the door, and they shoveled and shoveled and shoveled, and God bless their hearts. But my wife went out and she shoveled the last 4 inches of snow that fell since the kids left yesterday. And my kids, great little humans, they are not capable of shoveling that much. And I came upstairs and my wife was absolutely exasperated, right? She was absolutely wiped out. And I said, sit down, check your heart rate, have some water, have something to eat. She went out there and she shoveled. So once again, St. Nancy continues to make her case for sainthood. I will send that over to Pope Leo. Pope Leo, who's a Chicago fan. Chicago's where the Bears are. And actually, that's where we're going to start today's show. And I'll get out to the comments here in a little bit. But you want to talk about the Bears? We'll talk about the Bears because the Bears have an offensive coordinator who interviewed or was set to interview. They actually did interview with the Philadelphia Eagles. And Diana Rossini, noted lover of the Philadelphia Eagles and Philadelphia Eagles fans, reported this about a half hour ago, that one of the most highly touted names, one of the most exciting names, according to many, on the market for an offensive coordinator position, Bears offensive coordinator Declan Doyle has withdrawn his name from consideration for the Eagles offensive coordinator vacancy, per sources. Doyle opts to remain in Chicago, working with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. Now, we could look at that a few different ways. On one hand, you could say that's not a bad career choice out of Declan Doyle because chances are next year, when the next round of head coaching vacancies open up, if he once again has a strong year as offensive coordinator, working with Caleb Williams and working with Ben Johnson, sitting under that learning tree for one more year, it probably sets him up to have his choice of head coaching jobs next year. His name was not in as many of the conversations around head coaching vacancies this time. You stay with the same team, you stay with the same quarterback, the same head coach. You get another year to kind of fully flesh out your own ideas. Maybe you're given a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more latitude in what you can do. And then in the summer of the early winter or whatever of 2027, when all the head coaching vacancies are open, maybe then Declan Doyle has his choice of jobs. As it were, he can either remain an offensive coordinator with the Bears. He could take a lateral move to go work under a different head coach in Nick Sirianni, work with a different starting quarterback in Jalen Hurts. But is there really a value add there? I mean, unless Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman start the meeting by saying, hey, Declan, if you do a great job, we're ready to boot this Jamoke at head coach, and this could be your gig. The likelihood of that is almost zero. Do you take a lateral move? And I think it's a pretty smart career choice out of Declan Doyle to not do that. But it does make you wonder, because this is yet another candidate that the Philadelphia Eagles have brought in or have interviewed and has ultimately opted to pull out of the conversation. Brian Daboll, one that many people thought was going to be at or near the top of the Eagles' wish list, has opted to not further pursue the offensive coordinator position. Mike McDaniel, who a lot of people were very excited about, had head coaching experience, seems to have a very good offensive mind, has worked under some constraints with Tua Tagovailoa, who's got some issues, potentially, with his decision-making in games and also the gray matter in his head. He was a highly touted guy that the Eagles apparently had targeted, who also chose to walk away. And it feels like that list of guys who the Eagles have coveted that have not reciprocated that same level of interest, that list feels like it's growing. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I could tell you every little bit, every nuance to Declan Doyle's offense, nor how much autonomy he had over that offense when Ben Johnson is very much involved in offensive game planning. Well, I can't tell you that. I can tell you that there is a concerning trend. You add to this that last week the idea was put out there that Jeff Stoutland, who many regard as the best, one of the best offensive line coaches in the entire National Football League, well, he might not want to give up that title and those responsibilities as a run game coordinator. And you're coming into a team that hasn't outright, have we gotten full-on confirmation that Kevin Patullo's key card doesn't work getting into NovaCare anymore? And then you have this head coach that, for better or worse, is viewed as a meddler, even though he doesn't take the responsibility on the offensive side of the ball. But there is this belief out there that Sirianni's concepts are what's ultimately being implemented week to week. Have the Eagles somehow taken what should be the most attractive offensive coordinator position in the entire league? Have they somehow screwed this up and made it a place that no one wants to work? It's a fair question to ask. At this point in the offseason, the only hope that you can have as an Eagles fan is that the Eagles are actively engaged with or engaged in a conversation with a coordinator from one of the teams that just got eliminated, whether it's the Broncos or the Rams, or they are actively engaged in a conversation with one of the two teams going to the Super Bowl, and the Patriots or the Seahawks. But the likelihood of that seems increasingly lower and lower. And so once again, I ask a very simple question. Have the Eagles screwed this up? I don't know. I'm not involved in those conversations. I'm not in the room, nor am I down covering the team, having conversations with front office executives or agents or players. I'm just a guy who talks into a microphone. But I do think it is a fair question, because if you remember at the beginning of the offseason, that head coaching vacancy list continued to grow and grow and grow. And we saw Mike Tomlin get fired. No one saw that coming. John Harbaugh got fired. No one saw that coming. And as those vacancies started to dwindle and as those head coaching vacancies started to fill up, it made an already attractive proposition being the offensive coordinator of a team that won the Super Bowl a calendar year ago, that has all of the same offensive weapons at its disposal. That job should have been incredibly highly coveted. We should not, under any circumstances, be hearing that the Eagles' top 2, 3, 4, 5 candidates have all either interviewed or refused to interview, or upon interviewing have withdrawn their name from consideration. That is not ideal. And so what are you likely to get? Are you going to go out and find one of the brightest young offensive minds? Are you going to find somebody who's going to have multiple years, like some form of longevity here, with a quarterback that has had a different offensive coordinator practically every season of his professional career and then even going back to college? The likelihood of you finding one of those guys, it feels like, is dwindling. And what you're likely going to end up with is somebody who's going to be a Sirianni sycophant, somebody who's going to come in and be a bobblehead, right? Just like Bucky here is going to be a bobblehead, or a Brad Lidge over here, Chase Utley here, or Rammy, just going to be a bobblehead for Nick Sirianni. That's not what you need. You had that. You actually had that twice. You had that in 2023 when the offense went to shit after Shane Steichen left. You had that in 2025 when Kevin Patullo was hired from within, promoted from within, after the departure of Kellen Moore. You've had bobbleheads in that position. It hasn't worked. Either year that you've decided to promote internally, it has not worked. And the more candidates that go off the board, the more candidates that actively withdraw, the more I question the entire process. I put a tweet out. I'll get to the comments here in a second. But I put a tweet out on Sunday because I was watching what was happening in the AFC. And the Patriots had a very straightforward and simple path to the Super Bowl. The AFC playoff picture was not remotely as complicated or difficult as it's been in years past. The Patriots had a very easy pass to the Super Bowl. And then I looked at the NFC side. And while I will certainly admit that the Rams or the Seahawks would have presented a difficult path or a more difficult path, I still am resolute in the belief that this offense was far too talented, had far too much talent on it, and that even the collective sum of the parts may have been as good or better than the individual parts themselves. If you had a more competent offensive coordinator in place and buy-in from the offense, that the guy wasn't a jamoke, a schmuck, a jabroni, the Eagles probably had a relatively clear path. I'm not saying that they would have blown out the Rams. I'm not saying they would have somehow decimated a Seahawks team that looks really, really strong, and kudos to them. But I don't think this path to the Super Bowl was nearly as complicated as some people were trying to make it out to be. And with a more confident and competent offensive coordinator, I think there's a non-zero chance the Eagles advance to the NFC Championship game. And I do think that they give the Seahawks a legitimate run. And so I tweeted out, I may never forgive Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie. And many people agreed. Said, you know what? It's a good point. And there were a lot of people who were like, I can't believe this. This is a sense of entitlement. There's no guarantee the Eagles would have made it to a Super Bowl. There's no guarantee the Eagles would have made it to the NFC Championship game. You're such an idiot. You're such a dipshit. All that lovely stuff. I want to just re-rack something for people who have a hard time with critical thinking. Whoever you are, if you're out there, I want to just have a real quick education piece here for the people who just don't use the wavy bits of their brain and instead are like the koalas, the smooth-brained koalas that if you pick the eucalyptus leaf off the plant and put it in front of them, they don't know what to do. They have to eat it off the plant because they can't think critically. There are a lot of koalas out there on Twitter and social media. I just want to do a little bit of assistance for you. It is incredibly difficult to build a team that can make it to a Super Bowl, let alone win it. But that is the window where the accountability has to increase from the fan base. You don't sit back and rest on your laurels. If your team has made it to a Super Bowl, you need to up the pressure on the front office and the coaching staff and the players because it means they have the ability to reach the pinnacle. Now, if they don't get it done, like a couple years ago when the Eagles fell to the Chiefs, you increase the pressure because clearly you have enough of a squad there to get back there, maybe do it all over again, and maybe even win. And the Eagles, for better or worse, lost their offensive coordinator, promoted from within, and the season was an abject failure. Got bounced early in the playoffs. The pressure was ratcheted up. They went out. They got Kellen Moore. Offense was humming. You almost broke the single-season rushing record with Saquon Barkley. You won a Super Bowl. That's not when you release the pressure. No. That is when you increase the pressure again. Can you get back? You clearly have the nucleus of the team in place to build upon and to drive forward. And the second that you let the front office or the coaching staff or the players off the hook, it's possible they take a deep breath. They take a deep exhale. And that is where you get complacent. That's what happened this year. Because make no mistake about it, while there are people who feel like it's a sense of entitlement to say, oh, well, the Eagles could have made another Super Bowl. They could have won another Super Bowl. What about the Seahawks? Fair point. The Eagles got complacent this year. The Eagles decided to promote from within, and it was an abject failure and a wasted season. And when the Eagles got bounced to an inferior and significantly more injured San Francisco 49ers team, that should have been the wake-up call for this front office and even ownership. Perhaps we are not doing something right. And as this process has played out over the last few weeks, to me, it is clear as day something has gone amiss. Something has gone astray. This front office right now should be actively questioning, why does no one seem to want this offensive coordinator position with a team that could very well go back to a Super Bowl next year, should very well compete for a Super Bowl next year? What is limiting our attractiveness of this position? What is inhibiting our ability to go out and get the best and brightest offensive mind to come into the building, to come into NovaCare and be the offensive coordinator of this team? I don't know if they're having that kind of retrospective moment. I don't know if they are capable of that kind of self-reflection, but they need to. Because what this is setting up for is you are going to ultimately have to settle for another Nick Sirianni puppet. And that will not get the job done. It's failed twice already. If you run the risk of having it happen again, which is kind of where they're at, you run the risk of wasting another season, potentially having some discord within your locker room, as we saw early this season. I am concerned. I'm actually deeply concerned because this is that very tight, finite window of being able to compete for a Super Bowl year after year after year. There is no guarantee that if you get this offensive coordinator job wrong, that you'll still be able to overcome it and go on a deep run next year. There is no guarantee of that. And if you don't hit this right, there's a possibility you're waiting 5 or 6 years just to have the conversation again about trying to go to a Super Bowl. And that still might not happen. Need I recommend people how long it took from the Donovan McNabb, Terrell Owens, Philadelphia Eagles losing to the Patriots, going from that to the Nick Foles Eagles defeating the Patriots? It wasn't like it was overnight. There were a lot of painful moments. There was a hell of a roller coaster you had to go on to get to that point. And by the way, it wasn't like it was just a real quick blink from the Foles Super Bowl win to getting back to the Super Bowl with Hurts and then turning it around and winning a Super Bowl with Hurts. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. I could come on here, I could yell, I could rant, I could rave, I could scream. I am concerned with the direction of this search for offensive coordinator. And at some point, I kind of need to know who's to blame. Too many well thought of offensive coordinators and former head coaches who have been up for this job have chosen to pull out of this potentially golden opportunity. I would like to know why. I don't know if we'll ever find out, but I would certainly like to know why. I'm going to go out to the comments. Gloom and doom on a Monday. All right, let's see. Nick Abe's here. Says, we're back. Let's see. Darkwing McQuack says, it's nice to be home and catch a show live for a change. Darkwing, thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Chris Freed says, I still love hearing that crunchy sound your boots make as you create a new path through the undisturbed snow. Oh, a little ASMR. Should we take the microphone out into the yard and go crunch some snow for Chris? We're not going to do that today. We're not. No. Nick Abe says, it's getting to a point of Nick Sirianni job on the line. We can't get an offensive coordinator because of that dumbass. And then says about Declan Doyle, he's waiting until Nick is fired next season. Here's the problem, though. And this is the real issue, though. You know, Nick Sirianni might be a problem. And Chris Reed says here, you know, no one wants to work with Nicky and Jalen. I mean, at what point does the GM and the owner say, yo, something is amiss here? Are they willing to admit that something is very wrong if these guys keep pulling out of the search? Amadeo says no one wants to work under the microscope of Howie and Lurie. I think that it's more on the constraints of Sirianni's offense. And if the Stoutland thing is true, that could be problematic. Chris also says McDaniels and Fangio did not see eye to eye in Miami. He was never coming here as offensive coordinator. Well, I mean, you can previously not agree with or work well with somebody and then have a new chance and a fresh start, and you never know. Amadeo says, hire Jim Bob Cooter so I can be immature and laugh every time I hear his name. There's a Howie guy, though. Does it inspire a lot of confidence? I'm not so sure. Let's see. Nick Abe says about Howie and Jeff, they've done a shit job. They're letting it happen under their watch. I think it's really hard. Brian Knowlton says, Russ, call me crazy here, and I don't know much about football, but what about Doug coming back in the spot? I don't know how or why you would ever do it. Like, if you're Doug Peterson, that feels like career suicide. It really does, because if you come back in, you're coming to an organization where you were once the head coach, you led the team to a Super Bowl, you were kind of unceremoniously dismissed from the job, and then you're going to come in and work under the constraints of a guy who ultimately replaced you. Like, I don't see a path to wanting to do that if you're Doug Peterson. And if you're Nick Sirianni, do you want to have Doug Peterson come in? Because, like, the dynamic is still there in play. there are still relationships with people in the organization. Like, do you really want to run that risk? Because if you ever felt like there was a possibility that like your offensive coordinator could maybe be like gunning for your job, I don't think that there's a path there to being like, oh, okay, if the Eagles start off slow, they'll put Doug Peterson back in charge of the team. Like, I don't see that. So maybe if you're Sirianni, you go, all right, well, there's pretty much no chance this guy replaces me. But I would feel like there's a high risk of being undermined. I don't think it works out for either side, but I could be wrong. But I don't know. I really don't know. Flyers Ant says, if it's going to be an every year type of drama like we're seeing because Nick is sticking up for his boys, end the whole thing. I mean, I don't want to go that far, right? But it is a question. I think that this whole thing is like truly worrisome. If you're an Eagles fan and you're seeing these guys come off the board or withdraw from consideration, like there's clearly something that these guys have seen or heard that has given them pause. It's one thing if you find out that a guy hasn't been interviewed, right? Like let's say in the case of Declan Doyle, the Bears offensive coordinator, like let's just say hypothetically, the report comes out that the Eagles want to interview Declan Doyle, but he says, you know what, I'm happy in Chicago. That's one thing. But when you find out that the Eagles interviewed Declan Doyle, and then he goes, nah, I'm good where I'm at. That makes me wonder, like, what is it about remaining with the Bears that is so much more enticing? Is it just that you get to work with the same head coach, work with the same quarterback, and try to pad your resume so that next year you are the number one candidate for a lot of teams? Maybe. But if you're like watching a Brian Dabble or a Mike McDaniel, and if those guys ultimately don't take head coaching jobs and instead they take offensive coordinator roles, then like, doesn't that become a concern in and of itself? You're going to pass up on this to go work with like Justin Herbert? That's what you're going to do? Really? That to me is a concern. Brian also says, wasn't there word that Doug was going to be an advisor last year? I think that was floated out there, but I don't know if that was true at all. I really don't. I don't know. Amadeo says, you also have to consider if Jalen is refusing to run the ball, then that might be an issue too. No, I don't think that's a concern. I honestly find it hard to imagine that Jalen's unwillingness or lack of desire to run the ball is ultimately going to scare away a potential candidate. I also question how true that is. Like, yes, we can see that year over year, his running attempts dropped. There was also a change in offensive coordinator. I don't know. Was that by design? Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. Nick Abe says maybe Jalen and AJ have been right all along. I think they were about Patullo. I think that's pretty clear. See, here's where I'm going to be interested. If the Eagles make a hire of a Sirianni bobblehead at offensive coordinator, I think you will see AJ Brown request a trade, and I think the Eagles will try to facilitate it. If the Eagles go outside of their bubble, outside of their circle, and they bring in somebody who's actually revered as like a good offensive mind, then I think A.J. Brown stays. And if he does, that'll be pretty much proof that, one, a lot of the friction last year was with Patullo, and two, I think it would also prove that the mended relationship between A.J. and Jalen has been true. Like, they've actually kind of patched things up. We will see. I have no idea yet. Linda Joseph says, hell, fire Nick and bring in John Gruden. Totally silly and unrealistic, but here we are. Yeah, but can you imagine Gruden coming in? Like, Gruden coming in. I'm telling you, man. Hold on, let me see. I think I can do something here with the cameraman. Hold on a second. Cameraman? Who said something about a cameraman, man? Are we talking about cameras? Hold on. Where's the, I got a setup up here. Hold on, where do I go? There's got to be, I know there's a place here, somewhere. You can change the camera. Change the camera setting. I can't find it. It's gone. It was here. It's not here anymore. All right, well, we can't do it. If we could, I would do a whole thing. I'd do a whole thing, man, about John Gruden. We're not going to do it today. All right. Computer's not cooperating. Well, that's a little bit of a bummer. A little bit of a bummer. All right. If you were to get Gruden coming in here, though, good God, can you imagine? The kind of chaos that John Gruden would unleash on Philadelphia would probably be worth the price of admission. I would be fully on board with watching Gruden drive everyone insane. I think Gruden would, like, send Howie back to the closet. Maybe not. I'm telling you, man, I like Howard Grossman. Hey, he's a great GM, man. You want to talk about a guy who's willing to sit down and watch a guy coming out of Valley Forge Community College, man. That's the guy to go, man. Howie Roseman, he's down there. He's everywhere. He's scouting the 4th division of Rugby All-Stars in Australia, man. That's where he's at. Ernst Tanner's 2 fields over, scouting the 7th division Swedish soccer squad, bringing for the Philadelphia Union. Howie's right there with him, man. I'm telling you. He's a great executive, man. Jeffrey Lurie, we're talking about an owner. One of the best owners in football, man. That's what you got in Jeffrey Lurie. All right, I'm done. Let's see. Chris asks, how the hell do the Eagles afford the cap hit on an A.J. Brown trade? I don't think they do, which is another reason why I don't think he's going to get dealt. I don't think. Could be wrong. Stephen K, 6781 says, do you think Nick is a big reason as to why we can't get anyone? Yeah, I think that when there's enough smoke, there is some fire. I think that the combination of Sirianni wanting to still have significant say in the concepts, this rumor that came out about Stoutland needing to be the run game coordinator, the fact that only 2 candidates so far, I think in Dabble and McDaniel, were guaranteed autonomy and the rest have not been. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes it hard. If you're okay, play this one out. If you are looking for a promotion to offensive coordinator, chances are you're going to be willing to work under Sirianni's constraints and have an established run game coordinator and a great offensive line coach in Jeff Stoutland. You're probably fine with that. But if you were an offensive coordinator like Declan Doyle and you're looking to make a lateral move, well, you don't want to work under those constraints and you can't be blamed. He's probably working under some constraints with Ben Johnson as the head coach. If he were given full autonomy of Philadelphia's offense, well, then maybe Doyle would have taken this job. If you're a head coach, you've been a head coach, the idea that not only do you have to come in and not have autonomy, but then you're also being dictated, this is your offensive line coach, this is your run game coordinator, and you have to listen to this head coach for his thoughts on this offense that haven't worked to this point. Yeah, I'm not so sure that you would want to do that. Now, if you're a passing game coordinator, if you're a position coach looking to move up to offensive coordinator, you're probably more willing to do that. But if you're the Eagles, is that really what you want? See, you would think that if the Eagles are going to try to go out and get an offensive coordinator from outside the building, they would want someone who has actual experience calling plays, which means you're looking at OC or potentially head coach pool. And it just seems that right now they are not interested in this job, which again makes me wonder, how have they messed this up? Let's see. Nick Abe says, are we fucked as an organization? I don't think so. But it makes me question a lot about why this is happening, what the front office is doing about it, what ownership is doing about it. Let's see. What is this? Nick Abe says, Nick Nurse is on a hot seat, Sirianni is on the hot seat, Tocchet getting killed, and Rob Thompson getting destroyed. Yeah, I mean, there you go. There you go. I don't know if Nick Nurse is on the hot seat right now. I think that the Sixers have shown enough signs of life that I feel like it's not fully there right now. To be clear, I don't think we're there yet. I think we're okay. All right, now I want to get to some other stuff. The Eagles of it all and that breaking news about Declan Doyle had me a little bit fired up. I want to go to a positive place, and then we'll end with the Flyers because, of course, tonight I will be down at Xfinity Mobile Arena, and I've got to leave here even earlier than normal because apparently the roads suck. So I'm going to go risk life and limb to go do press row show of Flyers Islanders. Let's hope it's worth it, right? Okay. I saw this too. Every fan hates Nurse. Bro hasn't seen. I've seen Sixers Twitter. I have lived many years on Sixers Twitter. I'm not a huge Nick Nurse guy, but I think that, like, given how things have gone to this point in the season, I think that, like, Nick Nurse is probably pretty soundly safe. And again, I don't really see a scenario where Daryl Morey is going to move on from him, unless the heat gets really ratcheted up on Morey this offseason. Then Nurse will be a fall guy. I'm also not positive that Nurse is the right coach for this team. I'm not going to say that he's like an incredible head coach. I think he was largely carried to a title by Kawhi Leonard just tapping into the Monstars' talent and delivering that championship for Toronto. But I wanted to go to a little positive place. I wanted to go to a very positive spot, which is Joel Embiid is in the midst of a career renaissance, and I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it is truly one of the most amazing things that we have seen maybe ever. Like, you want to talk about a time that you went from seeing a guy that looked like he could not play any longer, could not function any longer, physically could not get the job done. If you watched the game against the Knicks this weekend, there's this incredible moment where Joel Embiid gets the ball around the free throw line, takes like two strides to the hoop, jams the ball, lands, doesn't fall over, doesn't hyperextend his knee. He looked like MVP season Joel Embiid. Now, the lateral quickness isn't there at the same level. The stride for stride, gazelle-like running that Embiid had in his first and second seasons in the league is clearly gone. But the plotting, even that we saw earlier in the season when Embiid looked like he was operating in cement or molasses, that seems to have also kind of dissipated. You're in this weird in-between where Embiid is neither that incredible athlete he was as a young guy, nor that plodding shell of his former self that he looked like last season. He's somewhere in the middle. The fact that he's gone through as many injuries and knee procedures as he has, and he's come out and looks like he does now, is honestly pretty incredible. Now, you could play the negative card like Chris Fried right now, saying, is Mr. Part-Timer Embiid playing today? He is not. He's not. But he looked fantastic over the weekend. He has played in significantly more games in recent memory than I think a lot of people have expected him to. And so I am not going to sound the alarm bells that Joel Embiid's not playing today. But he looked fantastic the other night. Had 38 points. I mean, call me crazy. When you're averaging more than a point per minute, I'm going to chalk that up as a good game. 38 points in 36 minutes. To go along with yet another double-digit rebound game, 11 rebounds and 5 assists. You're going to have me buying back in. I'll also point out that the Sixers got screwed late in that game against the Knicks, and there was a call that was not made that should have been made. There was a missed goaltending call. But we'll just kind of flush that one out of our memories. It's okay. 3-point loss to the Knicks, not ideal. But Embiid's resurgence, Embiid coming back onto the scene is a good thing for this team. Now, I do also want to pump the brakes a little bit. There's one part of this resurgence from Joel Embiid that I want to tamp the brakes on a little bit. This team is still at its best when Tyrese Maxey is the engine that makes the machine go. When Tyrese Maxey is the one through whom the offense truly runs, the Sixers are at their very best. Maxey is still your best threat on the ball. I'd argue he's still your best threat off the ball. I would still say that Maxey is the most dangerous still with the ball in his hand, with the opportunity and the willingness and the ability at any point to slash to the rim, to slash and kick out, to hit you with a step back three, to pull up in mid-range, to hit you with a nice little floater over the top. Maxey is still the guy that this offense needs to run through. We have seen the ups and downs of a VJ Edgecombe rookie campaign that I think should still have him in the top 2 or top 3 of total vote getters for Rookie of the Year consideration. And Paul George has been okay. Paul George hasn't been Paul George of yesteryear. He hasn't been prime Paul George, but as we've said a lot of times, Paul George is your third or even fourth option when all of these guys are healthy isn't the worst thing in the world. Now, Paul George did not have peak Paul George game against the Knicks. 9.6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and 32 minutes of action. It's not a stat line that's going to jump off the page, but remember, there's a lot more to Paul George's game right now and the role that he's playing, where he is critical to this team and their defensive makeup and their defensive identity. So even when Paul George doesn't have an incredible game on the stat line, we still observe holistically Paul George on both ends of the court, and we could still say he's doing okay. And if he's in the lineup consistently and these guys can continue to build chemistry, you're in good shape. The Embiid thing, though, the reason that I said there has to be a little bit of pause is you don't want to see Joel Embiid returning to that quasi-MVP form and that leading to Nick Nurse starting to say, all right, now it's time to run the offense through Joel Embiid like the team did for a decade. You don't need that. You don't want that thought in the back of Tyrese Maxey's mind that, you know what, I shouldn't take this shot. Let's go to the big man. I'll slash and kick out to Joel Embiid at the top of the arc for a 3. That is not what you want to have happen. You still want this offense to go through Maxey, get the requisite number of shots for VJ Edgecombe, get the requisite number of shots for Paul George, but ultimately the lion's share of the shots go to Maxey, with a very close second being Joel Embiid. As long as they continue to run the offense through Maxey, we're good. If this team starts to get a little bit Embiid-centric, well then, not ideal. Then we have to have a different conversation. Now, I will note, there was a thing going around from last week over on Bill Simmons' podcast. And Bill Simmons kind of proposed this hypothetical of like, if you're the Sixers, do you go in on getting Giannis in a trade that would like center around VJ Edgecombe? And yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it at all for a few reasons. But it actually did have me think, like, is there a path to that trade making sense? So I'm going to throw it over really quick to Bill Simmons over on The Ringer Podcast Network, brought to you by the Russ Joy Show. Let's go out really quick to Bill Simmons. I want him to propose the trade, and then we'll get into like why it does or does not make sense. Hint, it does not make sense, and thankfully Chris Ryan was there to reality check this. But let's go over to Bill Simmons really quick with the hypothetical trade.
There's another one on the list, and it involves the Philadelphia 76ers. And here's the trade. It's Giannis and the Gary Harris tiny contract for Paul George, the 2029 Clips Phillies swap pick that Milwaukee has, in VJ Edgecombe.
No.
Chris Ryan is correct. That's a no. So to recap that again, it would be Paul George, a 2029 pick swap, VJ Edgecombe for Giannis and Gary Harris. And so you think about it, right? Like in the past, it would have seemed like a no-brainer. How would you not make a trade of a rookie? Because he really would be the centerpiece of the trade. Yes, I get the Paul George is in there for salary purposes, but not trading a rookie for a guy who's won the MVP, a guy who's won an NBA title. How do you not make that trade? But then you think about it, and you think about the areas in which Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo operate, and you go, that probably would not work out particularly well. And then you also add to it, yeah, you may have cleared the Paul George contract, but Giannis probably isn't signing an extension, which means that every year remaining on his deal, you're going to be worried about whether or not he wants to stay or go. And you also have like guys who don't have fully redundant skill sets, but like, does Giannis move the needle enough for the Sixers to win them a title this year? Because like, to me, that's the real question. Like, are you willing to potentially move off of one half of the most dynamic backcourt in the entire Eastern Conference, if not the entire NBA, and VJ Edgecombe? Are you willing to move off of that guy right now while also bailing on the idea of having a backcourt of Maxey and Edgecombe for the next decade? Are you willing to move off that in the hope that, like, in this depleted Eastern Conference, somehow Maxey, Giannis, and Embiid together would mesh, which I'm not sure it would, and would be good enough to get to the NBA Finals and then somehow beat, likely, the Oklahoma City Thunder? Like, I don't see any scenario where that makes sense. Not one. I don't see that playing out in any way, shape, or form. But it is kind of wild. Like, if you were asked this question 2, 3, 4 years ago, Giannis is available in 2026, and it's going to cost you a very impressive up-and-coming rookie, a veteran that you signed that didn't really pan out the way that you hoped he would, and a pick swap. Would you do it? You'd say, of course you would. And yet, in this moment, I don't think there's anybody who would say, yeah, you know what, I'll take Giannis right now. Now, there are other stars in this league that you could maybe make a case for trading VJ Edgecombe, but it would have to be somebody who has longevity, right, has plenty of tread left on the tires, and also doesn't have a redundant skill set to Joel Embiid. I don't see it. That doesn't make any sense to me. Now, Nick Abe here kind of has the devil's advocate thing here. Says Jared McCain looks so bad. Well, he got sent down. McCain just looks like a guy who has not been able to get healthy. He looks like a guy who very much had knee surgery and then had hand surgery right on his thumb. And conditioning-wise doesn't look right. His lateral quickness isn't there. His explosive burst isn't there. His shooting has gotten worse. He looks out of shape. I don't know what you can do. You send him down to the G League. You hope that he picks up his conditioning there. He comes back up at some point, and maybe he becomes more of an impact player. But he was a guy who looked like Rookie of the Year a season ago. He's a guy that this team very clearly believed was going to have some real impact on this offense, if nothing else, and it has not gone well at all. And you obviously hope that 2 injuries in relatively quick succession aren't going to derail his career, but I think it very clearly has derailed his season. I don't see that getting better, at least this year. Could be wrong. Nick Abe says if McCain was average, Maxey wouldn't have to play 40 minutes a night. That's probably true. Darkwing says, been seeing Drummond might be on the block for the past day or so. Not sure how true that is. Even if he were, though, I don't know what you're going to get back for Andre Drummond that's really going to help this team. I would always be worried about getting rid of some of the backup for Joel Embiid. Right? Like, I'd always be worried about depleting your backcourt or your front court depth. I'd be really worried about, like, if Embiid were to miss time and then you once again don't have a center or a couple of guys who could back up the big man. That would not be great. Let's see. Gritty123 with the torts picture says, McCain is more focused on TikTok. I don't think that's true, but who knows? You know, weirder things have happened. I also just did a real quick check-in on the Sixers just to see, like, how's the game going against the Hornets? Because, you know, we're doing the show at the same time as Sixers-Hornets. Right now, Sixers are losing by 10 points to the Charlotte Hornets in Charlotte, 38-28. We'll see if that plays out. All right, that gets us to our last team of the day, Philadelphia Flyers. I don't know, you may have heard of them. Friday, I was very, very harsh on the Philadelphia Flyers. And so for all of you who decided that they were going to stay up for the game against the Avalanche, for those of you who were like, oh, you know what? This is going to be a bloodbath. I might just go to bed early. But then you decided to stay up instead. To you, I say you're welcome. You may have noticed that over on the Snow the Goalie predictions tweet, I said 7-3 would be the score. And when I said it, I actually kind of laughed. I'm like, this is such an outlandish, preposterous score that I think it's actually going to happen. Unbeknownst to me, the Flyers decided they were going to be the team to score 7 goals in Colorado. They handed the Avalanche only their second regular season loss regulation loss at home this season. 7-3 win. And you say to yourself, ooh, who factored into the game? Well, you would, of course, see that there was a hat trick from Owen Tippett, who we are huge fans of here at the Russ Joy Show. Always the biggest Owen Tippett fans. Okay. Hat trick. Wild times we're living in. Denver Barkey lit the lamp. Michkov had 2 goals. Bobby Brink set a career high for goals in a season. Good on Bobby Brink. We like to call him Bobbert Brink. But I want to get to Michkov because Michkov today is the guy to keep an eye on. He's always the guy to keep an eye on. And despite the fact that Rick Tocchet hates the fact that people are always asking questions about Matvei Michkov, and despite the fact that I'm sure Rick Tocchet had no idea when he took this job that people were going to be focused in on his handling of Matvei Michkov, had no idea. Michkov maybe had his best and most impactful game of the season against Colorado. And when you're looking at teams on the docket, teams on the schedule that you need to rise to the occasion to beat, Colorado is at or near the top of the list. Now, remember, there was a time not that long ago where there were questions about whether or not the Avs could maybe set the all-time mark for points in a season. There was a time that it felt like they were flat out unbeatable. I mean, even if you were to count the loser point, right, and you're just flattening it out, wins versus losses, regulation and overtime and shootout combined, they are still 35-15 on the season, the Avs. They are still 20 games over 500, wins versus losses straight up, 35-15. They have only lost 6 games this season in regulation. The Flyers just handed them only the second regulation loss at home. That is still something. Now, you can also zoom out a second and say, hey, the Avs are 4-4-2 in their last 10 games. They've been more beatable of late than they had been earlier in the season. All that is true. But that would be almost dismissive of a Flyers team that went in and got the job done and did it in an impressive way. Now, I will point out that Matvei Michkov on the night looked as confident as he has looked at any point this season. Did a great job maintaining possession in the offensive zone. Was creative with the puck. Looked confident with the puck. And in doing so, in lighting the lamp, you started to see from the Avs a bit more of what we grew accustomed to seeing last season with Michkov. He has gravity. You cannot allow Matvei Michkov to skate in the offensive zone unchecked, unmarked. You have to have multiple guys with eyes on Michkov. Friday night is exactly what you had hoped you would see. It's exactly what the Flyers desperately needed out of Michkov. Now, the question is going to be, is there a possibility that this will be a jumping off point? Did Michkov do enough against the Avs to convince Rick Tocchet that he is ready to take on the added responsibility, maybe play more than 12 minutes a night, and maybe be given a little bit more latitude to do what makes him a successful player? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, maybe he'll play like 10 and a half minutes tonight. Maybe he'll take a stupid penalty in the first period and Tocchet will like banish him to Siberia. I have no idea. I would like to imagine that after that performance, the coach raises his eyebrow like the Rock, right? People's eyebrow, not the corporate eyebrow. Never go corporate eyebrow. That's bad, very bad. If Tocchet starts going left eyebrow, you know he's lost the plot. Go people's eyebrow, right eyebrow. If Tocchet all of a sudden now feels intrigued by the player, well, then you might have something going. And I will point out that after this game, Tocchet did have some nice things to say about Michkov, but he had another, I thought, very interesting anecdote from this game. Tocchet was talking about the way that guys performed in this game and guys who spoke up on the bench. And he specifically called out Jamie Drysdale. That Drysdale was one of the guys who actively spoke up on the bench. And that caught his eye and that caught his ear. Remember, the Flyers were in the midst of some pretty bad losing ways. Now they end up walking with, 5 points in 3 games. And now all of a sudden everybody's feeling great and hunky-dory again, which is great. But some of the quieter guys on the team spoke up in a big way in the Colorado win, which is good stuff. And we saw Tocchet talk about Michkov after the game, give him like a special, an especially emphatic shout out for good play. I will also note that if you are a Flyers fan and you have been waiting for Nikita Grabenkin to factor back into the lineup, I got good news for you. Tocchet confirmed earlier today, Nikita Grabenkin is back in the lineup. Who's coming out? Garnet Hathaway. No Hathaway in the lineup tonight. Grabenkin is back in. Sam Harrison's getting the start in net. Apparently, Tocchet also said that Vladar is close to playing and that if they really needed him to, he could have been the backup tonight, which is a good, we say it's a pretty good thing. Everybody feel good about it. Vladar's getting close to coming back. We'll see what this game looks like tonight against the Islanders. If Harrison can just keep them in games, right? If he could just play replacement level hockey in net, the Flyers will be fine. If he gets his doors blown off early, well, then they're screwed. Amadeo says, Tocchet watching Russ's shorts. I bet you Tocchet saw at least 1 or 2 things coming out of Friday's show. I'd bet somebody said something about something. Non-zero chance. I always tell you, Tocchet is a very media-aware gentleman from what I've gathered, you know? Those silly little shorts. I don't know if my shorts are silly. Maybe a little bit. Let's see. There's a lot of comments over here. All right, hold on. About the Flyers. Vineet Singh says, if the trade is Owen Tippett in a package that gets Robert Thomas, fine, but we are not trading Tippett just to trade him. I don't see a scenario where they will trade him right now. I think that Tippett, listen, if there is a high-quality player available, I do think that Tippett's going to be one of the first names involved. I do. I think that Tippett has some value in this league because other front offices view the speed as elite. They think that they'll be able to break through and make a more consistent player, and I think Tippett is still attractive to a good number of teams out there. And if it gets you a higher quality player, then cool. Tippett's not my cup of tea necessarily, but I'm not saying, fire him into the sun for nothing. Let me see. Gritty123 had a really good thing. Did you see the clips of the Avalanche radio announcer having a full-blown meltdown while the Flyers were pulling away on Friday? So there were chants of "Let's go Flyers" in the background. And the Avs radio guy was such a whiny bitch. I don't have a nice way to put it. such an incredibly whiny bitch about what was happening in the game. And he was like, oh, you hear that? That's people who decided to leave Philadelphia, and they're here now. They decided to leave Philadelphia, but they're here now. They left that city. If you're going to leave the city, leave your fandom behind. I was like, are you kidding me? It sounded like such a ridiculously over-the-top diatribe. I thought that it was like parody. For a second, I was like, oh, somebody's doing a parody of like what an announcer would sound like, right? It was almost like a bad SNL skit being written. And yet, it was actually the radio announcer. And I can't play it here because if I play it on YouTube, then YouTube goes, that audio belongs to the whatever Avalanche radio network. It is one of the most pathetic things I have ever heard. And I would highly encourage you to go out over on Twitter. I think Nick Picone's the one who clipped it up. You have to hear it to believe it. It is absolutely absurd in every possible way. Craziness. Absolute insanity. Let's see. Philly fan asks, when are we going to get serious about Flyers leadership? Dan, I'm just a fan. Hilferty. Oh man, we're like doing, that's why there's two Dans. We're trying to like get the rhythm of Dan, I'm just a fan. Hilferty. Jones, Briere have zero experience in the roles. Longer it goes, the more concerning it looks. Here's what I would tell you. I don't think that the ownership or the governor person ultimately matters that much in the day-to-day hockey ops. I don't think that Dan Hilferty in his role has nearly the impact that a lot of you might think he does. In the same way that I don't think Dave Scott had much role or impact on anything when he was in that position. The difference is that Hilferty's actively a fan of hockey, understands hockey significantly better, doesn't need to have a Flyers alumnus holding his hand and explaining the sport to him. Hilferty is a good forward-facing governor for the team, and he's going to go along with whatever the front office says within reason. But I don't think his experience or lack thereof as an owner or as a governor really matters. I think Danny Briere has the right methodology in mind, and conversations I've had with him, I think that he values a lot of the same stuff that I value in the pipeline that I value in the way that many of you out there may feel. The one that I think is a fair question, critique, criticism, whatever, is Jonesy as the president of Hockey Ops. Now, I like Jonesy. Nice guy. I've only ever had positive interactions with him. But there are people that I have talked to from outside the Philadelphia market who have questioned whether or not that was the smartest hire when you have a guy who is as not fully inexperienced, but inexperienced as an NHL GM as Danny Briere. There have been questions about whether or not the Flyers would have been better off with somebody who had significantly more experience in a president of hockey ops role from a hockey ops perspective, not from the forward-facing can be a good face of the organization like Jonesy is, but is more of a, this person has like built Stanley Cup winning teams and is now no longer a GM, but they're a president of hockey ops, and they can be the learning tree for Briere to sit under. I think that might be the fair criticism. Maybe. I've been told that, like, I guess back in the day, the president of hockey ops, like, it was actually two roles. Like, one was on the business side, which is where Jonesy actually, I would think traditionally would have probably fallen on more of being that forward-facing guy. And then there's the one on the hockey ops side who's specifically there for, like, working to build the team and be in the nitty-gritty of everything. But I'm also not in that room. I don't know. I don't know what the full dynamic is. I can't tell you for sure that anybody's totally out of place there. I could just tell you that I've talked to enough people who've been like, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. I'll go back to like my questions around like when Torts was here. I think that Torts definitely had way, way, way too much sway, and that Torts was far too impactful in the like. I think that his personality and him ramming through what he wanted was outsized for being a head coach. I don't think Tockett's that guy. Tocchet and Jones, pals. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. Hilferty, happy to go along with, what his closest hockey advisors have to say. Briere's then there's the GM, and you try to do your job. Now, the more concerning thing would be, like, if we find out now, next year, 5 years from now, whenever this front office is moved on from, if we were to find out that, like, Briere did not want to hire Tocchet, like Briere was like opposed to the idea of hiring Tocchet, and that Jones was the one who actually like really moved the thing forward, convinced Hilferty, and then the Flyers didn't find any kind of success and they didn't develop players. And we found out way after the fact that Briere did not want Tocchet, and he was kind of like big brothered by the president of hockey ops. That would be a concern. That is maybe where you have the concern. If you want to be a pessimist, or you want to be a cynic, that's maybe where you can live there in a more happy place where you go, see, I knew something was amiss. But again, I don't know if that's the case. Yerk says, hope Savragan is the guy. That would be great. In net. It would be awesome if they could develop a number one goal. It would be very cool. Let's see some other comments here before we roll out of here. Robert Holston says, whenever there's a significant amount of Flyers fan base that hates a decent player like Tippett, I kind of root for them. I didn't see the... Oh, come on, man. Come on, man. See, here I am. Trying to go into reading a comment. Just trying to read a comment. Just trying to do things the right way. I tried. All right, let me censor Robert Holston's point. It says that he wants to root for people that the fan base turns against, like Tippett. He just doesn't trust parts of the fan base that decide to go against the player. You can certainly be a Tippett fan if you want. I don't think that Tippett is ever going to be a consistent 30-goal scorer that is a consistent enough player. I think that there's just such a streaky player in there. He might get to be a 30-ish goal guy, but I think it's always going to be scoring in clumps. And I think this team needs somebody who can be a more balanced scorer, scores goals in more games rather than scores the same amount of goals but in far fewer bursts. Let's see. We've got people going back and forth about Forster and Martone. Sure. Let's see. Flyers Ant says Forster's shoulder is already a problem. Yes and no. I mean, remember, we've had the same concern about Drysdale. He's been relatively healthy this year, so I don't think Forster is going to be... I mean, for whatever it's worth, I think this team very much thinks they're going to build in a large way around Forster. I don't see them moving on from Forster. Greg Bondarenko says, I feel Drysdale has been an unsung hero for them this year for the team. I think he's been a very good player for them. I think anytime that you don't have to talk about some of the defensemen, it's a good sign. My wife says, not sure Hathaway actually knows how to play hockey, just a feeling. She gets it. Maybe I should get her a Grebinkin jersey. You know, we're a Grebinkin household around here. Let's see. Yerk says Tippett is elite speed and an elite shot. Yeah, that shot misses the net more often than not. So I don't know. Elite speed is great. It'd be great if the shot was more consistent. Let's see. I don't know what this is supposed to be. You see the Penguins. What about the Penguins? What do you want me to see about the Penguins? I have seen Penguins before. I've seen Penguins at the zoo. Let's see. Monkey D Sky 13 with an AEW reference. I am the learning tree. I got you. Monkey D Sky. I got you. Where is Jericho? Where is he going to pop up next? Will it be at the Royal Rumble? We'll find out. Probably. Maybe. Who knows? Let's see. Amadeo says Mike Kafka is joining Detroit's coaching staff. Well, you know what? I guess some people's national nightmare is over. I know that there were a lot of people who were worried that Kafka was going to go to the Eagles. Tom Pelissero just put out, former Giants interim coach Mike Kafka is joining the Lions in a high-ranking offensive staff role. The hell does that mean? That is a weird tweet. A high-ranking offensive staff role. What the hell does that mean? Wild. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I'm also getting updates about the Sixers game. Yeah, not great. So, yeah, no. Let's see. Anything else over here? Will Gordon says Flyers defense is small. Yes, it is. Maybe it'll get bigger. I don't know. Let's see. Josh White says, Russ, what do we do with our defensive group moving forward? Trade soon, develop guys, draft guys. I think that eventually you're going to see They're going to have, I think eventually they'll move on from Risto. I do. I think obviously they are very big on this idea that they need a big lumbering defenseman to bring some size to the blue line. I would expect that Risto's a name that gets a little bit of traction ahead of the deadline if he's healthy. I would expect that he's moved by the draft or like even on draft night. That would be my guess. I think that they saw enough from this blue line without Risto to be like, yeah, we have a preconceived notion about size being of whatever the level of importance is, but I think that they like got to actually see this play out a little bit, and you feel a little bit better about the Flyers blue line without Risto. You got to see it for long enough that you can feel okay. All right, I think we're going to probably bail there. Yes. We're just past the hour mark. I got to go. I got to go do this long, harrowing journey to Philadelphia, down to the Xfinity Mobile Arena to go host the Press Row Show with Ant and Bundy and intern Andrew. If you were unaware, Flyers Carnival is this Sunday. I believe we are sending intern Andrew into the tank to represent Snow the Goalie this year. I am not getting back in that dunk tank. I think I told you guys this last year. I was very adamant that I had to be the number one person in the dunk tank last year because I saw how gross and cloudy that water gets over the course of the day. I was not going in that dunk tank again this year. I'll tell you what, my back, I kept getting hit by the board as I was going in the water. And we also lost the meritocracy. They wanted to just like let kids walk up and like push the button and dunk me. No. You got to earn it. Now, if you're like 2 years old and you can't hit the thing, well then fine. You go push the button. But if you're like 12 and you can't hit the target, guess what? You shouldn't get to come up and push the button and dunk the person. That's not right. That ain't right. Tain't fair. Tain't right. Carnival, Sunday. We'll have some guests on the show as well. All right. Let me think. Anything else? Wednesday night, we will be at Chickies and Pete's in Malvern. So if you're looking to come out, talk some puck. Wednesday night, 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock when we do the show? Yeah, we do show 6. 6 o'clock, we'll be streaming on all the Snow the Goalie channels, plus WBCB. We'll be on the radio as well. And I've been told we're getting somebody from the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. I don't know the name yet. I will let you know when I know. Okay. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you haven't done so already. Like the video, share the video, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notified whenever we go live with an episode. If you like the podcast even better, you can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Until Wednesday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. If you're traveling, travel safely. If you're staying home, stay warm. I'll talk to all of you Wednesday here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye now.